My name is Olivia Amaya Ortiz, and I'm an educator at the School for Advanced Research's Indian Arts Research Center. And for those of you who are coming in through our YouTube stream, I want to say hello to you as well. I'm speaking to you from our campus in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we as an institution are situated on traditional Tewa lands, in Ogapoge specifically, which is also known as White Shell Water Place. We're gathered tonight to celebrate 2022 Rollin and Mary Ella King Native Artist Fellow, Orlando Dugi. Orlando is a fashion designer whose work speaks to his Diné heritage and upbringing by fusing the traditional practice of storytelling with contemporary and exquisite abstractions. I'm excited to join you in learning more about Orlando's project and also his research while at SAR. As it relates to Diné textiles and his creative process in general. Orlando's designs have won him many awards as well as recognition over the years. He has placed best of class at the Heard Museum Guild Art Show in Phoenix, Arizona on several occasions, at the Cherokee Art Market in Oklahoma, and he has taken home several awards at the SWIA clothing competition as well as the market itself. You can see his work in the collections of museums, including, but not limited to, the Museum of Contemporary Native Art, as well as the Museum of Indian Art and Culture here in Santa Fe, the Peabody Essex Museum, and the Denver Art Museum. When Orlando first applied for this fellowship, his aim was to take advantage of the IRC collections and study further in depth historic textile materials and techniques. He proposed to create a garment that would be designed and inspired by weavings and materials of Navajo and the broader Southwest tribes. Orlando was going to tell you more about these research findings, but if I can speak from personal experience, it was truly special and humbling to spend time with Orlando in the collections, learning from his expertise and artistic eye. And as it turns out, Orlando crafted not just one, but two designs, and they will debut later this year in his new collection. We are sorry to see Orlando go, but there will be many more opportunities to see him again and his work. You can see his work at the Vancouver Fashion Week in 2 weeks, so book your plane tickets yesterday. He'll also have an exhibition at the Autry next year and the Vancouver Gallery. Of course, those who are local, you can see him at SWIA. And before we begin, I just, again, want to mention that we're streaming this event live via our YouTube channel, so everyone be on their best behavior and don't make me step in and discipline you guys for getting too rowdy. For those who are in person, we're gonna follow this talk with a live Q&A, and then we will go and visit the Dubin studio. So please feel free to stick around for that. We will have refreshments, and we will also get a sneak preview into the two garments that Orlando has designed. And without further ado, I would just like to invite Orlando up.
Thank you, Olivia. Yate, Anatko, and the SAR and IRC and the staff, and for accommodating me during my residency, and thank you for the Rollin and Mary Ella King Fellowship. I really appreciate it, and I've learned quite a bit while I've had my time here going through the collections. But I started designing clothing in 2009 was my first gown, and 2011 is when I decided that this is what I wanted to pursue. I wanted to pursue clothing design, and so I went about learning as much as I could about clothes making, dressmaking, draping, pattern making, all kinds of different stitches, beading. I learned new beading techniques, embroidery, and anything that's involved with adorning, embellishing clothing. And I'm still learning a lot of new things, and so it's always an ever learning process. But I wanted to start out with a film It's a behind the brand film titled Parallel. It'll kind of show you what I am currently doing. Heard about the fellowship, signing up for it. I went to sign up for it on the last day that you could possibly sign up, and I was having such an issue with uploading all my information from Safari. And I tried it so many times, and I was about to give up, and I actually did give up, but my partner said, you should try it one more time. So this time I opened it in a different browser, and then I redid the whole entire application again and submitted it, and then here I am. So it was a journey to apply. But anyway, one of the things that I did, I wrote on for the fellowship researching the collections that the SAR has here, old textiles. I was really interested in really early textiles, something prehistory. There were a couple of pieces which I thought were really, really amazing. But they have a lot of things from the 1800s, which I thought we saw so many beautiful textiles, and not only Diné textiles, but also Hopi and Pueblo. And it's really easy to find inspiration from a textile by simply just copying a design, a pattern from the textile, but that's not something that I do, and so I'm really highly inspired by my upbringing, my memories of participating in different cultural activities with my grandparents and my family. When I was young, we used to go to Nda, which is enemy way ceremony, in the summertime, and it's a long, several-day ceremony, and you kind of like travel from place to place until you end up back in the place of the clan that started the entire thing. Without going into much detail about it, but it's just inside, being sitting a part of the ceremony and partaking in the songs and the prayers and all the medicine that's there is such a profound feeling for me that I have always remembered and I carry with me. And so that really influences a lot of my work. in addition to spending time with my paternal grandparents in the summertime on their sheep ranch. And they have a summer ranch and like a winter place. And so you migrate the sheep from one place to another. And in the summertime, we would sleep outside. There would be like a shade house, and sometimes it's too hot to sleep even behind a little bit of greenery, that's trees that are cut down to make shade. So you put the mattress out in the open, the bed is out in open air, and you can see the stars. And I always remember laying between my paternal grandparents, and they used to point out the constellations to me and tell me the names of them in Navajo, and and then we'd learn like different star songs and things like that. And so that really carries across over into my work currently as well. That's why beads, cut beads, sparkly beads, crystals, sequins, and things that sparkle have a really big place in my work, and very intricate. And the intricacy comes from how elaborate Navajo ceremonies are and can be. And so because there's layers on layers of things that happen during a ceremony. There's the songs, there's the prayers, there's the rituals, and then there's the patience, there's the people who are there to support and pray for you. There's the holy person, the medicine person, and then all the holy beings that you're praying to. And so that's all of those kinds of things is in my work because it's the texture of my cultural background, and so that's how I see things. And so that's kind of a little bit about how I started into the clothing, or how I go about designing my work. One of the very first dresses I made was a floral gown, and I didn't know anything about pattern making or dressmaking, draping, but I had a sketch, an idea, I sketched it, and then I just went out and bought a dress form from Joanne Fabrics and just did it, right? And yeah, so it was my first piece, and I actually won a first place with it. And then the following year, I got a second place and second and a third place. And then the year after that, the Gasson family invited me to show with them at a show at the Mokna Museum. At that time, I think it was still called the IA Museum. But yeah, it was a long time ago, 2011. But yeah, so I entered that with them, and then after that show, I got invited to do a Fashion Week show here, and then also Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week in Oklahoma. And then that's kind of just how it evolved and kind of snowballed into me deciding, okay, then this really makes me happy, because when you design something and you make it and someone puts it on and it changes their entire posture and the way that they stand and walk and how they feel, it's a really great feeling. And I think that's the big reward from designing something. And so that's when I decided that, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And so I went about it. And so quick, brief history about that. So now the collection's here. Can't really see the whole screen, but I think the pictures will be fine. But so we pulled a bunch of different textiles, and I was looking at the texture of the textile. This was on the right here is that's just something that I find really, really, really cool. Oop, don't go ahead. And so I also wanted to look at some extra old textiles, and this was a fragment from, I forget the time period, it's like 580 or something. It's wild cotton, and spun and woven into this little piece. I think it was only about 5-6 inches, 5 by 6. And I took this through a magnifying glass. I don't know why, because your phone can take a really good photo, but I was just playing around with that. But I really Weaving goes back really far. There's weavers here, right? And weaving goes back a long way. Recently, there was a twill woven cape found in a bog in Ireland or somewhere. And someone on YouTube went and recreated that textile. But it's a really, really old textile. And so here on North America, they did twill weaving as well, not just the regular weave here, which I find really fascinating because, and I'll tell you later the thing that I was actually working on for this fellowship. This is a yucca sandal I think it was like 200 BC or somewhere in that time period. It was really old, but it was still really pliable. And this is something that I really wanted to explore is yucca fibers. And so when I got the fellowship, that's what I really I was hoping to find more of these type of items, something really far back, just to kind of show and see the history of this type of weaving or this type of craft, because normally a lot of people think that when something's woven here in North America that's really old or prehistory, it's only going to be a plain weave, something super simple. But after learning more about twill weave, it's actually pretty simple. It's just 2 over, 2 under, 2 over, and then just changing it up, changing 2 over, 1 under, and you get different patterns, and then you did different yarn colors can create a different pattern. But it takes a lot of time, as the weavers know. But I thought this was a really beautiful sandal piece. And another part of the textiles that I really enjoyed these are 2 Navajo textiles, is the little tiny details in the piece. Like this was the one on the right is a large wearing blanket, and these little fine white lines inside the crosses there. And just a tiny, tiny detail, but it has a really big impact. And I just find it really interesting that they did things like that. And then the simple stripe pattern. I don't know. Sometimes the simplicity of design is always really, really beautiful, where it doesn't have to be overly done. And for me, I love that look, but I tend to go beyond when I design things that I'm making. They tend to get pretty elaborate, but it's also, that kind of goes back to our culture, is we adorn ourselves with jewelry, with beads, stone beads, handmade stone beads, and clothing, like bright colors like silk velvet and silk satins. And if you ever gone to a ceremony in Navajo Nation in the summertime, it is bright colored and everyone is decked out, and it's a really beautiful sight to see. And so and what it would be really, really, really awesome to see is actual textiles like this being utilized again instead of a manufactured wool blanket. And so this is another text. I think this one might have been a Pueblo or Hopi Manta, or it might have been a, because I don't have the whole photo in here, but like I said, I was concentrating on the textures and the patterns that the different types of weaving achieved. But this is indigo, and I believe it was just a regular twill weave. But again, the pattern's really beautiful. And this is another twill weave. This is a black manta piece. And this one here was I really love the way that the yarns crisscross. And for this fellowship, I proposed one garment, which I just realized. Olivia reminded me that I would only propose one garment, but I'm actually doing 2. But I took this pattern. I just loved the texture of it, but I blew it up and printed it on silk charmeuse. And so I have this fabric that you'll see at the studio. And it just created a really beautiful look on the fabric, and I want to play with it a little bit more because the colors didn't quite come out the way I wanted it to, but it's something that you have to play around with in Photoshop and Illustrator. But this was a really good big inspiration for one of the pieces that I'm going to be finishing. And again, this is another shot of the same piece, just from a different angle. And so the way the light hits the different yarns is, it really changes the look of the texture on the same piece. And so in this blanket here, someone really loved this blanket. And so they redid they patched the little holes with other fragment pieces from old textiles. And this black and white twill piece is actually a Hopi made manta, or man's robe. And you can see it down there on the bottom left end of that piece. And I just thought that was really neat. And, Navajo and Hopi people are like really close together, like right next door. And right next to that little tiny fragment of the Hopi piece is another Navajo fragment. And I wasn't expecting to see it like this when they unrolled it. And if you flip, I didn't put a photo of it in this slide, but if you flipped it, you can see the actual hole that was worn into the center part of it, and that middle patch there, it covers that hole completely. But someone really loved this blanket and tried to keep it with them as long as possible. And that's something else that I also try to do with my clothing, is I don't throw any of my silk scrap pieces away. I have boxes of it, and they take up a lot of room. And my partner doesn't like it because we share a space, but I'm like, what am I going to do with it? I'm not going to throw it away. And that comes from my grandparents. They didn't throw anything away. And I think a lot of people from grandparents' day, we didn't throw anything away. And so, like, for instance, fabric would be put on a male sheep in the corral, to keep him away from the female ones. And, things like that. Or, they're stripped into different strips and used to tie things. And so reuse, repurpose. And so that was something that was really striking to me about this piece, is that that this was happening with this person's blanket. Whoever this person was pretty cool. So the Hopi piece there, I really loved this piece, and there was something about the way that this piece was woven. It was very loose, very open, but it's just a simple twill weave. And the black and white alternating yarns on them for both the weft and the warp created this pattern. And I wanted to recreate this pattern, but I didn't want to copy the Hopi style of weaving. And so I didn't want to just take this and recreate it, but I really loved the openness of it. And so my interest in the yucca plant being used by, peoples going back forever, making cordage, and so in my research this is before I came to SAR, I was researching how to process yucca fibers, and there's all different kinds of methods, and they're very crude. Making cordage, you just make a whole lot of it and have like a lasso. But so I really wanted to use this natural fiber and harvest it without killing the plant, right? So I'm clipping them from the outside and not taking too much from the plant, and then processing it. And all the different ways and you'll see then at the end of this, there'll be a short video of the making of the processing and the weaving of the piece that you'll see here soon. One of the ways, what I found after processing it is I did it without changing. I just took it, I cut the spine off and mashed it to get the pulp off, and then I scraped it clean, and then just left the fibers, and then left that to dry. And then when I went to spin it, I had to spin it, and I didn't have any a spindle to spin yarn, so, but I had a wooden dowel and a ribbon spool, and I just made a makeshift little quick spindle and started. I mean, like, I don't even know how to weave. I just remember seeing how my grandmothers spun their yarn, and I just kind of, that's how I learned, is I emulate like that. I learned silversmithing that way because my father did that for a little while, and I just remember how he did things, and I just kind of figure things out that way. And but so anyway, I spun the yarn, and having the fibers were probably only about 14 inches long, and so trying to splice those all together, I forget what that, you can put it on a flame or roast it in the oven, and maybe that will make the yarn more pliable. So because when I spun it into yarn and it dried hard, like crispy, not hard, but it was kind of crispy. It wasn't super supple, but I did like the way that the look that it got. And so here's the making of the processing of the fibers. In order for me to weave this, I just did my first weaving this year. I wove fabric to make a tailored jacket, and I thought I was doing a twill weave on that weave, but I was doing 2 over, 2 under, but I didn't alternate them, so they're like just straight lines, 2 over, 2 under each time, every other row, and so, but it still came out cool. And you'll get to see it if you come over. I brought that jacket. But this piece, because of that Hopi twill woven piece, like I said, I wanted to recreate that and use that as my inspiration. And so instead of doing just a regular twill weave, I decided I wanted to do a houndstooth. And so I took some natural black yarn, and I researched houndstooth, and there's a 4 and 4 color combination that has to happen on the warp and the weft to create this pattern of the houndstooth. And you can see just a tiny bit of it in the video, and you'll get to see it up close. But I also went further with using the yucca fibers by making flowers that I embroidered onto the to the piece. And this is going to be a man's piece. And for a lot of people, having the florals and the way how embellished it is will probably think like, why? Well, I don't really see that as a man's piece. But if you think back in history, in European clothing, for instance, men wore lace, men wore pink, and pink was considered a masculine color. But I don't see it as a masculine or feminine anything. It's just it's going to look great, and you'll see when it's done. But yeah, so and one of the things, a question that was brought up, this one has no sound. It's just going to play while I'm yapping. One of the questions from Olivia was, how am I going to go forward with what I've learned here? And so one of my goals is to come back to SAR to look through more of the collection. And now that I know how easy accessible the collections are here, I think that's going to be a really great resource just to get more inspiration or to learn more and try to bring something really old into now and try to, to bring it into now. I think that's going to be my big goal, and try to do things without adding too many synthetic objects into my work. Although, of course, there's beads, but, and I'm also going to, I'm thinking, I talked to Wayne Gasson about collaborating on a piece for this upcoming collection, so that'll be kind of in the future to look forward to. But I think right now we can open it up to questions. I think Olivia wants a question first.
Oh, I'm getting a question first. Well, thank you first, Orlando. So I guess one question I'll just to start things off is continuing on your idea of, a women's line or a men's line. With these two pieces that you have created or in process, who do you, when you're in the process of designing and creating, who do you envision wearing your designs?
Someone who will feel comfortable in it. That is one of the first things that I always ask a model is, how do you feel in it? Because I don't want to force somebody to wear something that they're not going to feel comfortable in. This past summer, one of the male models he's never modeled before, but he was interested in it, and I had him try on this lace see-through shorts, and like the whole thing, even the pockets are transparent fabric. And he was not too thrilled about it. I mean, he was like, I'll do it, but if you really want me to. But I could tell he was uncomfortable. And I said, well, if you change your mind, call me and let me know. And then later that evening, he called me. He said, And I said, just say it. And he's like, well, I don't really feel comfortable in that look. Can you find me a different one? And I was like, okay. Which, in fashion world, is a no-no. You're given what you're given to wear, and you have nothing to say about it. You wear it or don't show up. Or if you don't show up, then you're kind of axed. But that was one of the things when I started is I tried to emulate what the fashion industry does. But I'm in my 11th year, going on my 12th year next year. And I've decided that I don't need to follow that. I'll just do what I want to do, and I'm doing okay.
Yeah, you seem to be doing fine. Let's talk about your materials a little bit. You use yucca, which is amazing to see that process, really interesting. And maybe for folks who might be unfamiliar, can you speak more to some of the other materials that you typically use and your thinking behind that?
Well, I predominantly work in silk. All different kinds of silk fabric, silk chiffon, silk organza, charmeuse, taffeta, silk and wool. And I think that really stems from silk velvet available and silk fabric, silk ribbons that were available to trading posts, at trading posts throughout history, and Navajo people, acquiring them. And it was my family on my father's side were wealthy in sheep, right, in livestock, and so that's something that they could definitely afford. And so I think that just kind of carried over into, like, again, it's all from my upbringing, my family's history, and so I think that's why I gravitate towards silk is because we know how valuable it is and how extravagant it can be, and how beautiful it is. It's so shiny and lustrous, and I use a lot of silk, lots of different beads, glass beads, sequins. This is gold embroidery. This is gold metal, flat metal, bullion, French wire, crystals. Recently started getting into knitwear, and I have a couple knitters from Santa Fe, and we have one sitting right here, Sherry, thank you so much, and Kathy. And then also, I'm really trying to think about my history, my Diné people, right? And so weaving is a very big part of that, and I've never really explored that before and incorporated it into my work. And so this time I'm starting to bring that into it, and without it looking like a Navajo rug or a Navajo blanket. But the knitwear actually is, they're mini replicas of, like, there's a couple of wearing robes that you'll get to see over there. It's sparkling. Yeah. Yeah, that's basically all you can do. I mean, especially if it's really embellished, it has to be spot cleaned or hand washed. Like, for instance, if somebody got something, they could always send it back to me and I'll clean it. It just depends. Or you can take it to your very trusted dry cleaner and have them do it.
All right, any other questions currently? All right, one more.
You said that you began in 2011, is it? And looking through some books today, I remembered one of the most spectacular dresses in the Native Fashion Now show was one of yours. And I was like, hearing you say, well, I just began, how did your look come to be in that show if you were just starting out? Or had you started your collection showing? It's so beautiful. I'm shocked that you only started so recently.
Yeah, I think that look that was in Native Fashion Now was the painted silk with the feathers and the headpiece. Yeah. That collection I think I created in 2013. And I think Native Fashion Now was 2015? 16. Somewhere in there.
I saw it in New York, which always gets it late from the mall.
Yeah.
From the Smithsonian, but that's why I was like, it must have been one of your early collections.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that piece I created in 2013, and I think, like I said, when I first started, I started right away just getting invitations to do this show and that show, and the photographs that from the shows were really kind of put me out there, and I think that's how I met the curator for that show, is through photos that she had seen and while researching. So yeah.
Gorgeous.
Thank you.
Cool. We'll take one more question and then we'll wrap up our Q&A.
Hi, I was curious. So as you were going through finding the fibers that you use and being very conscious about the sustainability of the kind of materials that you use, how, if anything, has it changed your perspective on modern fashion and Western fashion?
When you really look at it, it's a very wasteful industry. And the fashion industry is the second largest polluter in the whole entire world. And I just don't want to contribute to that as much as possible. But and then you have to think about money, like how are you going to survive? I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it's a very hard question. But I think for me, when I just look at my work, me and myself, and what I'm trying to do, that at least I think I'm helping by still contributing to the beauty of the world without damaging it as much as possible, as little as possible. I think. I'm not sure if that's what if that kind of touches on your question, but.
Yeah, I was curious if it's just your overall perspective, given
Yeah, I mean, like, it's hard to imagine just coming up with an idea and not touching it at all. I think that one's a big one for me. You know, I think for a large fashion brand, being a creative director is, you know, very different than being the actual designer than the maker of something. But yeah, I think everything I do is I touch in some way. So even though I have a seamstress now, but you know, there's still things that I have to do from start to finish, which are the one-off pieces. And I'm just starting to get into some made-to-order, ready-to-wear, which is like they're not going to be sitting on a shelf waiting for you to be bought. You know, you have to order it, and then I'll make it. But yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry,
thank you.
thanks.
That was a great question. With that being said, we're going to wrap up this portion of the evening, and we're going to head over to the Dubin studio. We have some of our IRC folks with their name tags on, and they'll help walk you through the cold, dark to the warm spot with beautiful pieces and some goodies to munch on. All right. Thank you, folks.
Yeah.